In the vast, silent theater of space, where stars whispered secrets older than time and empires bloomed and withered like cosmic flowers, humanity had finally found its voice. We had carved a home for ourselves among the celestial giants, a fledgling civilization reaching for the light. But the universe, in all its ancient wisdom, had yet to learn humanity's most fundamental lesson. And some lessons, as it would discover, could only be taught through fire and fury. The conference chamber aboard the Nexus Prime station was a symphony of alien energies. Ambassador Tomas Rivera felt the immense pressure of Earth's first major treaty negotiation settle upon his shoulders. He was flanked by Commander Olivia Grant, her military resolve a fortress beside his diplomatic calm, and Dr. Hassan Okonkwo, whose scientific mind had been our key to understanding the alien life before them. The invitation had come from the Velkari Empire, an offer that seemed almost too good to be true. They were a species of breathtaking elegance, their crystalline skin scattering light into 1,000 rainbows. For 3 centuries, they had been the undisputed masters of this galactic sector. Their representative, High Chancellor Draxus, moved with the grace of sculpted water, his melodic words translated into crisp, confident English. "We offer humanity membership in the Velkari Prosperity Sphere," Draxus announced, his voice echoing with the assurance of a power that had never known true challenge. "Your worlds will flourish. Your technology will leap forward by centuries in a single generation." Around the great table, delegates from 6 other member species signaled their approval. The insectoid Chitauri clicked their mandibles in polite agreement. The gaseous Nephrim pulsed with soft, bioluminescent light inside their containment suits. The reptilian Skarn remained perfectly still, their cold, calculating eyes missing nothing. This was the audience for humanity's first galactic performance. Tomas leaned into the microphone, his mind racing. "Your offer is most generous, Chancellor. However, Earth has certain conditions that must be met before we can consider full membership." A ripple of astonishment spread through the chamber. No one, it seemed, negotiated with the Velkari. They dictated. Draxus tilted his head, a gesture of curiosity. "Conditions, how refreshing. Please elaborate." Commander Grant brought a holographic map to life, detailing proposed human colonies and trade routes. "We require full autonomous governance of all human worlds," she stated, her voice firm. "We will contribute to collective defense, but our military command structure remains entirely independent. All human territories will be sovereign under human law." "Acceptable," Draxus replied with surprising ease. "These terms align with our standard colonial agreements." Dr. Okonkwo then spoke, his voice deep and resonant. "We will share our biological databases and medical breakthroughs, but we must maintain exclusive rights to all human genetic material. No experimentation, no sampling, and no archival without the explicit consent of Earth Science Council." "Also reasonable," the Chancellor confirmed. "We respect the bodily autonomy of all member species." Tomas exchanged a look with his team. The moment had come, the foundation of their entire strategy. "There is one final condition," Tomas said, letting the words hang in the air. "It is non-negotiable, absolute, and permanent." The room fell into a deep silence. Even the constant chittering of the Chitauri went still. Draxus leaned forward, his crystalline face a canvas of shifting light. "Continue. Any act of violence, coercion, or harm directed toward a human child by any member of the Velkari Prosperity Sphere, or its allies, will be considered an immediate act of war against the entirety of humanity. No exceptions. No diplomatic immunity. No gray areas. Touch a human child with ill intent, and you will face the full, unyielding wrath of Earth." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with confusion. A Nephrim delegate pulsed a confused orange. A Skarn hissed, a sound of pure bewilderment. Draxus studied the 3 humans, truly studied them, for the first time. "This is highly unusual," he said slowly. "Most species include general protections for all members. Why this specific, intense focus on your young?" Commander Grant's face was carved from granite. "Because in human culture, in our evolution, in the very core of what makes us who we are, protecting children isn't just a priority. It is our primary function." It's the sacred line we will not allow anyone, ever, to cross. A Chitauri clicked through its translator. Your young must be extraordinarily vulnerable. Do they lack natural defenses? Armor? Venom? Dr. Okonkwo gave a solemn nod. They are vulnerable for years. Human children require nearly 2 decades of intensive care and protection to reach maturity. This extended childhood, this period of profound vulnerability, is the very crucible that forged our intelligence, our cultures, and our powerful social bonds. We evolved as a species that would sacrifice everything to protect its young. Draxus conferred with his advisors, their huddle a kaleidoscope of refracted light. The minutes stretched into an eternity. Finally, he turned back. Your species is peculiar, he admitted. Your young are slow to develop, yet you mastered faster than light travel in a blink of evolutionary time. This obsession with protecting your immature members is fascinating. He paused, then spread his arms in a gesture of grand acceptance. However, the Velkari Empire sees no issue with this condition. We have no interest in harming the offspring of any species. Your clause is accepted. A wave of relief washed over Tomas, but it was tinged with a cold premonition. Draxus didn't understand. He couldn't. He had agreed to a term he perceived as a cultural quirk, a footnote in a grand treaty. Weeks later, at the official signing ceremony, Tomas pressed his palm to the biometric scanner, binding Earth to the prosperity sphere. Across the room, he met Commander Grant's gaze. She gave him a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was an acknowledgement shared between warriors, a confirmation of what they had truly accomplished. They hadn't just negotiated a treaty. They had drawn a line in the cosmic sand. They had set a trap, baited with humanity's most primal, most powerful instinct. The Velkari, in their arrogance, had agreed, thinking it was just a strange demand from a young, naive race. They would learn. Oh, the entire galaxy would learn. Because there is one truth etched into the very soul of our species, a promise carried in our DNA through millions of years of evolution. If you harm a human child, you don't just face humanity's anger. You face something far more terrifying. You face humanity's purpose. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the vast unknown. We'll see you in the next one. 5 years after the treaty signing, humanity had spread across 12 worlds within the Velkari prosperity sphere. Colony 7, orbiting a blue giant star in the Kepler frontier, had become a model of interspecies cooperation. The settlement housed 3,000 human colonists alongside Velkari advisors, Chitauri engineers, and even a small Skarn trade delegation. Director Natasha Volkov ran the colony with efficient precision, her background in both military logistics and civil engineering, making her the perfect administrator for this frontier outpost. The colony's school had become a point of pride, where human children learned alongside the offspring of other species, a grand experiment in cross-cultural education. Teacher Ben Morrison loved his job despite its challenges. Teaching human history to a classroom that included species with completely different evolutionary backgrounds required creativity and patience. On this particular morning, he watched his students file into the classroom, a mix of eager young faces and curious alien observers. Today, we're going to learn about Earth's ancient civilizations, Ben announced, pulling up holographic displays of pyramids and temples. The human children leaned forward with interest, while a young Chitauri named Zikthar clicked excitedly, their species fascinated by architectural structures. Outside the school in the colony's main plaza, 8-year-old Sophie Chen played with her friends near the central fountain. Her laughter echoed off the dome's transparent ceiling, where the blue giant star painted everything in azure light. She chased after Tommy Barnes, both children shrieking with joy as they played an improvised game of tag. Sophie's mother, engineer Patricia Chen, worked 3 levels below in the colony's power distribution center, confident her daughter was safe in the carefully monitored common areas. The colony had been peaceful since its founding, with no incidents of violence or conflict between species. That peace shattered in a moment of miscalculation and cultural ignorance. Trade Delegate Krenth, a high-ranking Skarn, had spent 3 months at Colony 7 finalizing mineral rights agreements with Director Volkov. His species valued efficiency and direct action above all else. They communicated through complex body language and chemical signals that their translator devices struggled to fully convey. That morning, Krenth had received troubling news from his homeworld. A trade deal had fallen through, costing his clan significant resources and prestige. In Skarn culture, when faced with dishonor, one demonstrated strength through dominance displays. For Krenth, watching the human children play in the plaza while he dealt with failure struck him as a profound insult. Though no insult was intended, the Skarn approached the fountain where Sophie had stopped to catch her breath. In his species culture, physically asserting dominance over smaller, weaker beings was an acceptable way to restore one's honor in public. He reached out with one clawed hand and grabbed Sophie's shoulder, intending to push her aside as a demonstration of his power. Sophie screamed. The sound triggered something primal in every human within earshot. Patricia Chen heard her daughter's cry 3 levels below through the colony's open comm system. Ben Morrison heard it from his classroom and was running before he consciously registered what he'd heard. Director Volkov's hand slammed the colony-wide emergency alert before the scream had fully faded. Tommy Barnes, 10 years old and acting on pure instinct, tackled Krenth's leg. The Skarn, surprised by the attack from such a small creature, released Sophie and stumbled backward. Security Chief David Park reached the scene within 30 seconds, his weapon drawn, his expression cold enough to freeze helium. "Step away from the children," David ordered, his voice carrying the deadly calm of someone ready to kill. Krenth raised his hands, confused by the sudden escalation. "I merely corrected an inferior being blocking my path. This is acceptable under Skarn protocol." "You touched a human child," David said, and those 5 words carried the weight of damnation. Within minutes, the plaza filled with every human in the colony. They didn't come angry or shouting. They came silent, weapons ready, their expressions transformed into something their alien neighbors had never seen before. Patricia Chen held her crying daughter, checking her for injuries while her eyes never left Krenth, promising violence with every fiber of her being. Director Volkov arrived, her personal guard flanking her. She walked directly to Krenth, stopping just close enough that the Skarn could smell the aggression pheromones humans released when protecting their young. "You are under arrest for violation of Treaty Article 7, Section 3, Subsection A," Natasha stated. "The harming of a human child constitutes an act of war." "War?" Krenth's translator conveyed his confusion. "I barely touched the juvenile. She is unharmed. This is absurd overreaction." Ben Morrison stepped forward, his teacher's gentle demeanor completely gone. "You don't understand. You'll never understand. But you're about to learn." The Velkari advisor, a diplomat named Thessia, tried to intervene. "Surely we can resolve this through dialogue. The child is frightened but uninjured. Perhaps an apology and compensation." Natasha turned to Thessia slowly. "Read the treaty. Read every word of Article 7. We told you this was non-negotiable. We explained what it meant. You agreed. But surely you didn't mean actual war over such a minor incident." Thessia's crystalline features flickered with uncertainty. "That's exactly what we meant," Patricia Chen spoke up, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "Sophie is 8 years old. She was playing. He grabbed her, frightened her, hurt her. That's all it takes. That's all it's ever taken." Security Chief Park secured Krenth in restraints while transmitting a priority alert to Earth's Defense Council. The message was simple and devastating. Treaty Article 7 had been violated. A Skarn trade delegate had harmed a human child. The machinery of war was now in motion. As Krenth was led away, still protesting his innocence under Skarn cultural norms, the alien residents of Colony 7 finally understood what they'd missed in the treaty negotiations 5 years ago. Humans didn't protect their children the way other species did, with reasonable measures and proportional responses. Humans protected their children with absolute, terrifying certainty. Cross that line and reason died. Diplomacy died. Only consequence remained. The emergency session of the Velkari Council convened within hours of the incident report from Colony 7. High Chancellor Draxus reviewed the footage with growing disbelief, watching the human response unfold in real time. Around him, representatives from all member species gathered, their expressions ranging from confusion to concern. "This is madness," declared Council Member Vrix, a senior Chitauri. One child briefly frightened, unharmed, and they speak of war? Our species lay thousands of eggs. We accept that many will not survive. This is nature. The humans are not like us, Dr. Okonkwo reminded the Council via holographic transmission from Earth. He'd been summoned to explain humanity's position. Your species, Vrix, produces many offspring knowing most will perish. Humans evolved differently. We produce few children who require years of intensive care. Every human child represents an enormous biological and social investment. More than that, protecting them is hardwired into our neurology. It's not a choice. It's who we are. Draxus studied the human scientist carefully. Dr. Okonkwo, surely your government understands that Trade Delegate Krenth acted according to his species' cultural norms? He meant no true harm. Can we not resolve this through apology and reparation? Hassan shook his head slowly. Chancellor, do you remember the treaty negotiations? When we insisted on Article 7, we tried to make you understand. Humanity went through millions of years of evolution, where our survival depended on one absolute principle: protect the children at any cost. The individuals who didn't have that instinct, their genes died out. What you're seeing isn't policy. It's biology meeting culture meeting technology. So you would truly go to war over this? Thessia asked from her position at Colony 7, her voice transmitted across light years. Millions could die in such a conflict, all because one individual made a cultural mistake? Commander Grant, now Admiral Grant after 5 years of building humanity's defense fleet, appeared beside Dr. Okonkwo in the holographic transmission. Yes, that's exactly what we're telling you. And it's what we told you 5 years ago. You agreed to the terms. Krenth knew the law. Every species in the prosperity sphere received explicit briefings on Article 7. Ignorance is not an excuse. The Skarn representative, Ambassador Threx, hissed in frustration. Krenth is a decorated officer of our people. He will not be surrendered to human justice for following Skarn tradition. Then the Skarn Empire has chosen war, Admiral Grant stated flatly. Not just with humanity, but understand this clearly. We will not stop until either justice is served or we're all dead. There is no middle ground. There is no compromise. You touched our child. The council chamber erupted in agitated discussion. Species that had never considered humans a military threat suddenly faced the reality of a war they hadn't prepared for. The Velkari Empire had grown comfortable in their dominance. Their weapons advanced, but their soldiers trained for peacekeeping, not actual combat. Back on Colony 7, Sophie Chen sat in her mother's quarters, wrapped in blankets despite the comfortable temperature. Patricia held her daughter close, rocking her gently as she'd done when Sophie was a baby. Mom, did I do something wrong? Sophie asked quietly. Everyone's so angry. There are soldiers everywhere. Patricia kissed her daughter's forehead. No, sweetheart. You did nothing wrong. You were playing. You were being a kid. What happened to you should never happen to any child anywhere. But Teacher Ben said people might fight because of me. Not because of you, Patricia corrected gently. Because someone hurt you. Because someone thought they could hurt a child and face no consequences. We're showing them they were wrong. In classrooms across human space, teachers had difficult conversations with their students. Parents held their children closer. The collective human consciousness, spread across 12 worlds, unified around a single purpose. The politicians debated strategy. The military mobilized fleets. But every human from Earth to the furthest colony understood the fundamental truth. This wasn't about territory or resources or political power. This was about the one thing humanity would never compromise on. Tomas Rivera, the ambassador who'd negotiated the original treaty, sat in his office on Earth watching the crisis unfold. His assistant, a young diplomat named Jennifer Park, entered with updated casualty projections. Sir, intelligence estimates if this goes to full war, we could lose 15% of our total population. The Velkari have numerical superiority and better defensive technology. Tomas nodded slowly, his eyes distant. And if we back down? If we let this slide? What message does that send? That humans can be intimidated? That our children can be harmed without consequence? Jennifer, humanity has fought wars for less than this. We've burned civilizations to the ground for less than this. The only reason we've survived as a species is because we're willing to die to protect the next generation. Even if it means the next generation might not survive the war. Even then, Tomas confirmed. Because if we won't fight for them now, what kind of universe do they inherit? One where humanity is seen as weak? Where other species think they can harm our children without facing justice? No, some lines can't be crossed. Some principles can't be compromised. Not even for survival. The deadline passed. The Skarn Empire refused to surrender Krenth for trial. They offered compensation, public apology, even economic concessions. But they would not admit that one of their officers had committed a crime worthy of punishment. Admiral Grant gave the order. The First Fleet, humanity's largest military force, dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Skarn space. 147 warships, their weapons charged, their crews ready. The message they broadcast was simple: return the one who harmed our child, or face the consequences. The Skarn responded with their own fleet. Confident in their superior numbers and advanced shielding technology, they'd never fought humans in actual combat. They'd studied human history, seen the wars and conflicts that marked humanity's climb to the stars, but they hadn't understood what those conflicts revealed. Humans didn't fight for territory. They fought for each other. They fought with the desperate fury of a species that knew extinction was always one generation away from reality. They fought with the accumulated rage of every parent who'd ever lost a child, every community that had ever failed to protect its young, every ancestor who died so their children might live. The battle lasted 6 hours. The wreckage of the Skarn defensive fleet drifted through the darkness of space, a monument to miscalculation and cultural blindness. Admiral Grant stood on the bridge of the ESS Perseverance, watching the last Skarn vessel retreat and surrender. Her tactical officer reported minimal human casualties, 12 ships damaged but none destroyed. The Skarn had lost 40% of their fleet. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Skarn High Command," her communications officer announced. "They're requesting immediate negotiation and offering to surrender Trade Delegate Krenth for trial under human law." Olivia allowed herself one moment of satisfaction before responding. "Accepted. Have them transfer the prisoner to the ESS Justice for transport back to Colony 7. And send word to all human forces, ceasefire in effect pending formal resolution." On Colony 7, Director Volkov organized a gathering in the same plaza where the incident had occurred. Sophie Chen sat between her parents, still processing everything that had happened. Around them, every human colonist assembled, along with representatives from the other species who'd chosen to remain despite the conflict. Ben Morrison stood to address the crowd, his voice carrying clearly in the enclosed space. 5 years ago, when humanity joined the Velkari prosperity sphere, we made one thing absolutely clear. We told them who we are. We told them what we value. We told them the one line that could never be crossed. Today, the galaxy learned that humanity doesn't make empty threats. We don't bluff about protecting our children. Patricia Chen raised her hand and Ben nodded for her to speak. "My daughter is 8 years old. She likes dinosaurs and building robots. She wants to be an engineer like her mom or a teacher like Mr. Morrison. She's a child with all the wonder and potential that childhood represents. When someone hurt her, even briefly, even without permanent injury, they attacked everything humanity has fought to preserve since we first stood upright in the African grasslands." Sophie looked up at her mother, understanding dawning in her young eyes. "So all those ships, all those soldiers, they came because of kids like me?" "They came because of all kids," Tommy Barnes's father, Security Chief David Park, answered. "Human kids, Velkari kids, Chitauri kids, every child of every species. They came to send a message. Children are off limits, always, forever, no exceptions." The trial of Trade Delegate Krenth took place aboard the ESS Justice, broadcast across the entire Velkari prosperity sphere. The proceeding was conducted with meticulous fairness, with Skarn legal experts present to ensure their cultural perspective was represented. The evidence was presented clearly. Krenth had received explicit briefing on Article 7. He had grabbed a human child with sufficient force to cause fear and minor bruising, and he had done so intentionally as a dominance display. The verdict was guilty. The sentence was permanent exile from all human territories and mandatory education service teaching Skarn youth about interspecies cultural sensitivity. Krenth would spend the rest of his life ensuring no other member of his species made the same mistake. High Chancellor Draxus traveled personally to Colony 7 for the formal resolution ceremony. He stood before the assembled humans, his crystalline features reflecting the lights and patterns that conveyed deep regret in Velkari body language. We failed to understand, Draxus admitted publicly. When humanity insisted on Article 7, we thought it excessive, paranoid even. We agreed because it seemed harmless, a peculiarity of a young species. We didn't grasp the fundamental truth you were sharing with us, that humanity's entire civilization is built on the absolute protection of children. We do now. Tomas Rivera, who'd traveled from Earth for the ceremony, stepped forward. Chancellor, humanity doesn't expect other species to feel exactly as we do. We recognize that different evolutionary paths create different priorities, but we do expect our boundaries to be respected. When we say something is non-negotiable, we mean it with every fiber of our being. Dr. Okonkwo joined them, his scientific perspective adding context. The incident at Colony 7 wasn't just about one child or one moment. It was about the principle that allows humanity to function. We're a social species that requires massive investment in our young. Remove the absolute certainty that children will be protected, and human society collapses. It's not cultural. It's biological. It's what makes us human. In the weeks following the resolution, something remarkable happened throughout the Velkari prosperity sphere. Other species began implementing their own child protection provisions, not because they were required to, but because they'd witnessed something profound. They'd seen an entire species mobilize for war, risk everything, face impossible odds, all to protect a single 8-year-old girl who'd been frightened in a playground. The Chitari, who laid thousands of eggs and expected high mortality, started establishing protected nurseries. The Nephrim, who reproduced through spore distribution, created sanctuaries for their developing young. Even the Skarn, despite their culture of dominance and strength, began teaching their children that some beings were never appropriate targets for power displays. Sophie Chen returned to her normal life, though she'd forever be known as the girl who started a war. She handled it with the resilience of childhood, focusing on her studies and her friends. On the anniversary of the incident, she stood in the plaza where everything had begun, now marked by a memorial stone with a simple inscription. Here, humanity drew a line. Here, the galaxy learned to respect it. Admiral Grant retired from active service a year later. Satisfied that her message had been received, she opened a school on Earth, teaching military history and interspecies relations. Her first lesson to every class was always the same. Protecting the powerless isn't weakness. It's the highest form of strength. Any species can destroy. Only the truly strong can protect. Ben Morrison continued teaching at Colony 7, his classroom becoming a model for interspecies education throughout the prosperity sphere. He made sure every student, human and alien alike, understood the lesson of Article 7, that civilizations are measured not by their ability to wage war, but by their commitment to protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Patricia Chen eventually served as director of Colony 7, taking over from Natasha Volkov. Under her leadership, the colony grew into the largest human settlement outside Earth's solar system. She never forgot the day her daughter screamed, or the way humanity answered that scream. It informed every decision she made, every policy she implemented. The Velkari prosperity sphere thrived in the years that followed, stronger for having learned the lesson of human resolve. Trade flourished. Technology advanced. New species joined the alliance, each receiving thorough briefings on Article 7 and what it represented. 10 years after the incident, Sophie Chen graduated at the top of her class and enrolled in the Interspecies Academy, studying xenopsychology. Her thesis focused on the evolutionary roots of parental protection instincts across different species. She interviewed Krenth as part of her research, finding in him a reformed individual who'd become one of the galaxy's leading advocates for children's rights. I broke a rule I didn't understand, Krenth told her during their conversation. I harmed you out of ignorance and arrogance. It cost my people dearly, but it taught the galaxy something essential, that some protections are universal, some boundaries are absolute, and some species will burn the stars themselves to defend what they hold sacred. Sophie published her thesis to great acclaim, its central argument becoming foundation for interspecies law throughout the Velkari prosperity sphere. That every civilization has certain core values that define them, and respecting those values isn't just diplomatic courtesy, it's survival necessity. On Earth, in the halls of the unified government, Article 7 was preserved in its original form as a reminder and a promise. Future generations would know that once humanity went to war not for conquest or resources, but for principle. They fought not because they were cruel, but because they were human. They drew a line in the cosmic sand and dared the universe to cross it. The universe had crossed it once. The universe had learned. Some rules exist not to be tested, but to be respected. Some species, pushed far enough, will show you exactly who they are. And humanity, when their children were threatened, had shown the galaxy something it would never forget. That the same hands capable of building starships and composing symphonies could become fists of absolute retribution when the innocent were harmed. This was the lesson of Article 7. This was the price of ignorance. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy, the knowledge that in the vast darkness of space, where countless species competed for survival and dominance, there existed one species that would sacrifice everything for a single principle: touch a human child and face the wrath of humanity entire, not because humans were cruel or vengeful, but because protecting children was the very foundation of what made them human. It was the rule they'd lived by since the dawn of their species. It was the rule they'd die by if necessary. And now, after pain and conflict and hard-learned wisdom, it was a rule the galaxy understood and respected. Not out of fear alone, though fear played its part, but out of recognition that some principles, however strange they might seem to species with different evolutionary histories, deserve to be honored. The stars continued their eternal dance. Civilizations rose and fell, but in the heart of the Velkari prosperity sphere, on a dozen human worlds and 100 alien planets, children played safely in plazas and parks and playgrounds. They played knowing that humanity had drawn a line around them, a line of fire and steel and absolute commitment. They played knowing they were protected, and the galaxy played knowing the cost of forgetting that protection. It was a lesson written in sacrifice and courage, in fury and love, in the universal language that every parent of every species could finally understand. That children represent hope, and hope is always worth fighting for, always.